Welcome, everyone. My name is Dana White. Welcome to the Myth Salon. This is a reuniting with my good friend Norland Tellez, with whom I was a faculty colleague at an art college in Santa Monica more than 20 years ago. And I walked by this classroom, and he had this Ptolemaic drawing on the board, and I was fascinated by it. And I immediately thought, this is somebody I've got to get to know. So, welcome back, Norland. Many of you know that I just returned from walking the Portuguese Camino de Santiago Compostela in Spain and Portugal. And what a pilgrimage, what a lifetime. It's my shell. Here we go for it. I would wear it, but I wore it for couple weeks while we were doing this. I would highly recommend, if anybody is in need of a pilgrimage in their life, walking one of the 7 caminos that go across Europe to Santiago. It's just an amazing, amazing journey. So what I'd like to do is do a little less talking and open it up, and let's have a moment of silence, and then we'll come back in just a moment. I'm always particularly struck by the theme of a particular topic that we do at the Myth Salon, and most of them I have some familiarity with, and almost none of them do I have very little familiarity with, and this falls into the very little familiarity with. But I was approached by Vincent, and he wanted to tell me about the Popol, the Mayan spirituality. Well, I immediately referred him to Norland, because Norland had been at my house, when we were doing Myth Salons live. And this was probably 6 or 8 weeks ago. And I encouraged the conversation, and basically I wanted to vet him. I wanted to make sure that he, was what he said he was. And as it turns out, they've been in a fast series of conversations. So what I want to do is read a short poem, and then we'll let it go. The poem's called Return to the Center. For one drawn to stillness, the center is the womb of being, the sole refuge from chaos, the source of all expression. In the center, light splits into stars. We sleep beneath the heavens. The earth is a sacred place, a cauldron, indigenous people know, that is a window into the one, the cosmos. The great mother of all existence, the one gives rise to all difference, all directions, all divisions. And yet, the one, the Great Spirit, permeates time unchanged. While everything else moves, the one is the eternal constant, breathing life into everything. North, south, west, east. Above and below, everything off-center is defined by its outsider status. Distance from the one, which creates tensions between the colonizers and the colonies. Whatever centers in the one resides within the mother. Home. No paths, only place. No separations, only unity. Outside, every way leads back home. Every night transforms into sunrise. Every departure from home holds infinite potential to return to the center. The offering is eternally available, awakening the pilgrimage to reunite with Mother. So, Will, let's get this thing rolling. Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Thanks, Dana. Yeah, I love actually what you're saying has a lot to do with where I wanted to start too, the bringing things into the center as opposed to taking things from the center out, which is what I think about when I think about colonization. I think about ancient Greece, and it's really actually a very cool image where they would take this home fire, whether it was in Delphi or what was the other place where it might be, whatever, one of these two places would be very common to take the home fire, and then you take the fire from the center to the colonies, so that the fire was spreading. The colony was a spreading of the fire from the center out. And actually, a theme that's interesting today is, not only did Vincent reach out wanting to talk about Mesoamerican mythologies, but also we have a couple friends here that are here because they fit this conversation, but for another reason as well. We've started a little bit of an expansion with Myth House, just a little bit of an opportunity to support some others doing some interesting conversations. And so today we have Sunil and Dawn with us, who have started a couple other conversations in India and in Scotland for the world. And so as you set up this structure from outside in instead of from inside out, really it's how I feel, because really what it is we're inviting their fire from where they are in the world to come to the center with us. So a complete inversion of that colonization. And so today I hope we'll deconstruct and reconstruct whatever colonization is and what it means and what it is together, as we have an intentionally international conversation today. So now I'm going to do some introductions, starting with Sunil. So Sunil has started the mythology classroom some years ago. We've been working together for a long time. And so we decided that we'd start sharing and promoting those mythology classroom events. The last one was actually on Mesoamerican astrology in comparison with Hindu astrology. So very related to this, we'll share that back out. So thanks for being with us, Sunil. Dr. Sunil Parab is an Ayurveda practitioner and Indology teacher from India. His research mainly focuses on Indian mythology, Indian philosophy, and Indian folk deities. Dr. Sunil has been teaching and researching through Sindhu Veda Research Institute since 2014. And it's this project mythology classroom that connects Indian mythology enthusiasts with global mythology scholars. Sunil, great to have you here. Thanks for joining it. What time is it there?
It is 5:30 a.m. right now.
Man, and we normally talk on the other side of the day. So thanks, Sunil. All right, same. Dawn, I want to bring Dawn in. I met Dawn in Scotland. Dawn is putting together a conversation called Maiden Mother Crone, and has led a couple of these initial conversations out of Scotland. And Rosalie and Sunil have been supportive of that as well. So Dawn Ava is the founder of Maiden Mother Crone, a nonprofit focused on rebuilding community by embracing all aspects of marginalized by current patriarchal systems. Dawn is a practicing alchemist and artist dedicating to translating metaphysical concepts into tangible experiences and applications. We met actually watching very odd, wild, amazing experimental films working with this material. These experiences and applications are created with the aim of consciousness expansion and transformation in mind for both the individual and the wider community. Trained in various schools of wisdom and a member of numerous orders, societies, and guilds, Dawn Ava draws from Hermeticism, alchemy, and theosophy and other mystical traditions. She's developed unique frameworks and practices that bridge the physical and metaphysical realms using artistic practices to explore, understand, and express this abstraction. Her work invites a profound exploration of reality and a reconnection with spiritual essence, fostering a more holistic and enlightened existence. Thanks for being with us, Dawn. And what time is it where you are?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to be here. And it's 11 minutes past 1.
Oh my God. See, that's love. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay, Rosalie Bouck, who's been with us a couple times, PhD, is an educator and activist whose work focuses on fostering radical social change through myth and narrative. She holds degrees in mythological studies, which we went through together with Dennis back at Pacifica, political science, and philosophy. She currently cultivates and teaches courses to the public on counter-colonialist feminine mythologies and gives regular talks on the subject of her doctoral research, Mesoamerican corn mythology. Originally from the Colorado foothills, Rosalie currently resides in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she lives with her 2 young children. Hey, Rosalie, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be back. Can't wait to talk corn. Just letting you roll through it.
And Dennis, of course, our teacher, Dennis Patrick Slattery, PhD, is a distinguished emeritus professor in mythological studies at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Carpinteria, California, where he taught for 27 of his 55 years in the classroom, several of them to us here in this group before retiring, including Dana. He is the author, co-author, editor, or co-editor of 33 volumes, including 7 volumes of poetry and 1 novel. Currently, he teaches courses online and offers lectures and workshops on myth and culture, both online and on-site at Friends of Young organizations in the U.S. For 3 years, he also taught student inmates at a California state prison, where he focused on assisting his students to discover their personal myth using Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The course was conducted through the mail. He writes op-ed essays on cultural and mythological themes for the San Antonio Express News and New Braunfels, Texas Herald Zeitung. His op-eds and paintings can be viewed on his website, DennisPatrickSlattery.com, which I'll share in just a moment. Thanks for being with us, Dennis. Can't wait to see you when we work it out in Bastrop.
We'll do that, and it'll happen. Thank you all, and I know I'm going to learn a ton tonight from so many of you. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. Cool. Michaela Molden, former student of mine, graduate, story expert. Michaela Molden is a recent graduate passionate about storytelling and the performing arts. Having earned accolades for her excellence in storytelling, Michaela is an accomplished writer and actor. During her undergraduate years, she spearheaded various clubs and initiatives focused on stories and mythology, showcasing her dedication to fostering creative communities. Currently, Michaela is working on her debut book while immersing herself in the world of storytelling. She actively engages with the work of others, continuously seeking inspiration and connection with the literary and artistic community. She's also, I think, going to join us one of these times down in Bastrop too. Hey, Michaela.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. All right, cool. We're rolling along. All right, Dana, you guys know Dana, contributing faculty member to Pacifica's Myth Degrees and author of numerous volumes of mythology. Over the course of his career, Dana has worked in radio and industrial television as vice president of marketing and as an academic department chair at an arts college. He edits and designs books, produces films and motion media for universities, corporations, and nonprofits, has done that for a career, and is a professional photographer with more than 40 books to his credit. He currently produces and hosts this Myth Salon, a venture we created together back in 2016. Hey, Dana, we're in. All right, cool. And now I'm going to introduce Vincent, one of the main topic experts for tonight, and then Norland, who's going to take us away. So Vincent, we're meeting for the first time. It's great to meet you. Vincent Stanzione left his familiar culture and society to embark on a profound experiment in life. Dedicated to reforesting areas devastated by La Violencia, he became a forest dweller, practicing zazen and constructing simple adobe and pine structures. Immersed in the languages of Maya Quiche and Maya please tell me, help me with it. Vincent's journey led him back to Harvard, where his mentor called upon him after he wrote Rituals of Sacrifice, Walking the Face of the Earth on the Sacred Path of the Sun, a compelling narrative of pilgrimage and initiation. Vincent lives myth as a way of mimetic remembrance, embodying ancestral traditions through his deep understanding of myth and its transformative power. He finds joy in intellectual conversations, particularly those exploring the Popol Vuh, myth, and hermeneutics, cherishing those invigorating exchanges that enrich his understanding of the world. Great to meet you, Vincent. Okay, cool. And Norland, finally, Norland. Great to see you again, Norland. And as mentioned, it was great to have you with us originally back, not just at Dana's, but then another time with the Joseph Campbell Foundation Mythological Roundtable that we did up in Ojai. I think actually I'm wondering even if Michaela saw Norland. Did you see one of those events, Michaela?
I was at the Ojai, yeah. I saw your
Wow.
artwork and yeah, one of your presentations. It was great.
Wow. Okay. And for those of you guys who don't know, the Ojai Foundation burned down like a month or two after that.
Yeah.
And it was part of why a lot of energy, transitioned. Dana and I decided to start doing this. I've been doing mythological roundtables with these Myth House friends for a couple of years in Ojai. And then, it burned down. And for years it was gone. And they've just now started putting it back together as the Topa Institute. So Norland from the Ojai Foundation, now with us online. Norland Tellez is an award-winning writer and animation director who currently teaches animation and character design courses at Otis College of Art and Design, Cal State Fullerton. He's also conducting a life drawing lab at USC School of Cinematic Arts. He earned his PhD from Pacific Graduate Institute in 2009 with a dissertation in the Popol Vuh and the Quiche Maya. which he is currently translating and illustrating in its archetypal dimensions as the wisdom of the peoples. You can learn more at norlandtellez.com, which I'll share again. And now I'm going to hand it over to Norland. He's going to take us away, and he'll invite back the panel when he's ready for us. Thanks for being with us, Norland. Great to see you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here with my new best friend, Vincent Stanzione, who's, I think, has been quite a fortuitous meeting. And as you know, as unfortunately the Popol Vuh is one of these sacred books, I mean, of the stature of the Odyssey, of the Iliad, all combined with Dante's Inferno and the Gita, it's breathtaking, the just expansiveness of time. Of course, the Maya people were famous for their worship of time and their thought about time, the importance of time, the sacred dimension of time. And so, as Dana told you a little bit how we came to talk, and very much like the twins in the Popol Vuh, we came to realize who's a solar and the lunar twin, come together in many ways. Our conversation has been just so wonderful since Vincent lives there. He speaks Quiche. He has been there for decades. How long have you been there in Guatemala?
I'm now here 35 years, huh? So three decades and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, really living their way of life.
And I was, because I see the beautiful green background behind you. I thought I would just take you outside real quick and take you to Tolan, the place of the reeds. It's just outside the house here where the corn grows, right next to the lake shore. I'm on the lake shore, Lake Atilan. I don't know if I can pull this off, but
no, please. Oh, wow.
So there's the lake, this Lake Atitlan. It's dropping its level out there. You can see the corn. It's next to the canes. This is the of the cane out this way. This is the tule. That's the reeds, and then the corn is in the back. So it's a world of canes, different kinds of grasses, different kinds of corns. But that's an ancient cornfield out there, 5,000 years old, 6,000 years old. We don't know, but that cornfield has always been out there. And so that's why I came to live here, so I could live with the people and, just have this life with the Mayans as a person who always wanted to be living with indigenous people. So I really wanted to thank Dana for introducing me to Norland, because we have had these absolutely beautiful conversations. And I just feel so thankful. I live in a lot of isolation. In the sense of, you never get to meet a person who has the type of knowledge that Norland has about the Popol Vuh, and then also about myth and understanding myth and hermeneutics and colonization and decolonization, and then the art, the idea of how important the aesthetic is. Hillman talked about these aesthetic cultures, and we're talking about an aesthetic culture tonight with the beauty of the Popol Vuh. The words are so beautiful, the images are so beautiful, and they're written to be beautiful. So I just want to say how grateful I am to have met Norland through Dana, and I appreciate you guys having confidence in me. I can tell you, I can remember the night that I watched you guys online, and Will, Linn, and Dennis talking about myth on the Mythosophia and Myth Salon, and then Dana's work, different people. So I was like, I got to get on that. I got to talk to those people, so I really appreciate you inviting me into the conversation. It means a lot to me.
Well, welcome. And it's really a joy to be able to know the right person to introduce you to. When we saw that message and it was obvious, Dana knows Norland so well. So it's great that conversation has grown the way, and we're looking forward to getting into where it went.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, of course, immediately we started to talking about is the very thorny and prickly issue of the colonial gaze, with this sort of objectifying gaze of domination, and cultural appropriation, with which, of course, is growing up in the West, but even living there among the natives, even the natives themselves are not immune to falling into this ideological fantasy. Really, when it comes down to is because it's obviously an offshoot of the imperialistic domination of Western powers have had over natives people. And so, you know, and this is where it gets prickly and thorny, and we're liable to have our feelings hurt, you know, like and yet, you know, as Vincent and I have talked, is precisely through blood that initiation occurs. Unless we're willing to bleed a little, you know, we're not really going to be able to escape the comfortable, cushy position of the colonial gaze, which is very, you know, protean in the way, because it's of course an unconscious fantasy. We're not really aware, you know, in the very act, for example, that we admire the beauty, we admire the aesthetics, we admire all of these qualities that attract us so much to myth, you know, we don't realize how we're already placing, exoticizing, and placing the native culture behind this grid of domination, in this case, intellectual, even spiritual domination, and objectification and commodification, you know, which is, of course, I mean, it's so intrinsic to us that looking at something like the Popol Vuh, right, in the light of its wisdom, is bound to have this repellent effect on Western audiences, especially, you know, if you're very comfortable in your ideological fantasy, you know, like, I mean, we have to understand about ideology is that it does have a mythic core, right? So ideology is not just a rational belief system as the way Jung, it actually depends on this irrational, quote, mythical core. And so that's why there's really no difference between talking about myth and talking about ideology, if we're happy to displace or dissociate myth from its historical body, its historical ground, the literal, you know, which unfortunately in the trends of Jungian psychology, the literal has become the enemy, right? Like, and also for Campbell as well, the literal is the enemy, you know, like, and the worst thing you could do is to think about it literally. And so you can see that already approaching the Popol Vuh and coming from Pacifica, I was immediately challenged in this very concept of myth, which again itself is belongs to an ideological fantasy about myth, and it's really not. It's very comfortable within the colonial gaze, and that's again one of these painful truths, you know, like that we need to realize that it's not so easy, you know, just as feminists know, women know, you know, that, I mean, this worshipful objectification of women, you know, including as goddesses and all of this, you know, like, has at the same time a dehumanizing effect. Am I not right? I mean, Rosalie, I would love to hear from Rosalie and Dawn and Michaela on this, whether or not you see this overlapping with this colonial gaze and the male sort of objectifying gaze. I don't know, what do you guys think? I'd like to have a conversation.
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, it's kind of, I think that they're in sync. They support each other. They're all rooted in similar complementary ideologies. They're all sort of limited in the same way, and they're certainly complementary. Yeah, I think it all plays in together. These very limited manifestations of things, so, you know, is part of the general kind of colonialist problem. It needing to be this thing, the truth, the one thing, and it happens whether we're talking about femininity or masculinity or ideology. I mean, it definitely affects it in all places. The rigidness.
I think it's interesting to talk about commodification and how that's kind of a very a staple in Western in the Western approach to otherism and that kind of thing. You're talking about that with the commodification of indigenous culture and the exoticness of it, and how that the value that's placed on it is because it's almost because it can't be understood. Well, that's kind of that there's that crossover you're talking about with that the feminine, the divine feminine, the dark feminine, all of that. That's something that it since it can't be understood, perhaps it can be possessed, or it can be quantified or labeled or something in a way that we can understand it in our world, but not truly, share with it. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting having a look at the perspective of how this is incorporated within the subconscious, or even the collective subconscious, like looking at the divine feminine in terms of that womb space of unlimited potential, but also how it can be that universal unconscious aspect, the unknown behind the veil. And I think in my experience, because it's so difficult to separate ourselves and observe what we're unconscious of, it takes this sort of energetic masculine bringing our conscious awareness to the subconscious. And I think it's more about how we can look at this sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine to work together in unity so that they're integrated, rather than it being something we can identify in its own individuality. It's so difficult to see what we can't see. So it becomes this sort of practice. And I guess for me, growing up in a Western culture, how do I know what parts of me are it takes a lot of effort to become conscious of what's been indoctrinated into me through my upbringing and all the ways that it becomes invisible. So I think it's really exciting to have these conversations, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're bringing our conscious awareness to these aspects of us. And it's only through things like this that we can start to understand how we develop those better relationships.
Well, remember, Brutus, can you see yourself? Oh, of course I can, but I can only see myself by reflection, by some other thing, right? It's just, Cassio says, it's very much lamented that, Brutus, you don't have a mirror, right, with which you might see your shadow. I know I'm not quoting it perfectly, but the idea is that we need mirrors, right? Because we're talking about the gaze. That's why the concept of the gaze, and again, it's like this is something that Jungian psychology is kind of weak on. And this is where you got to go through Lacan. Lacan has a lot to say about the gaze, because it's like you're saying, we don't see ourselves, right? You don't see ourselves looking. So we're not, this is the problem even within academia. And this is where I kind of push back a little bit, because, they're looking at decolonizing as though you're looking for specific content, like for this particular wrong view, or, oh, no, look, that's not how the natives understand it. You're wrong. Even though you talk to a variety of them, and then you realize that there's no single agreement as to what is the native point of view, or even like Vincent, remember we talked about how, for example, it was fashionably decolonial to not to attribute creation to indigenous cultures, the concept of creation, because that's Judeo-Christian indoctrination, and it is like, that's not how you have to think about it. And then at the same time, we're not aware of how we rob then the creativity of the Maya. I mean, right, Vincent? I mean, like, what was that? I mean,
yeah, that was the whole thing about, like, don't use that word. Don't use creation. Don't use creator. Yeah. The words that they use is former and shaper, sakol, bitol, alom, kahalom.
This is an account of the beginning, when all was stillness, silence, and water. There was no light, no land, no plants, no people, and no animals. 6 deities, covered in green and blue feathers, lay in the primordial waters, the framer and the shaper, the Peu and Quetzal serpent, along with Piyacoc and Xmucane. These deities helped Heart of Sky, also known as Huracan, create the earth. Their spirit essence and their miraculous power gave the earth its creative energy. Now the land had a heart, and they called it Heart of Earth. To separate the sky from the earth, they planted a tall ceiba tree, making space for all life. The roots penetrated deep into the 9 levels of the Maya underworld. The trunk was on the surface of the land, and the branches reached up to the 13 levels of the Maya upper world. The plants were next created to live on the earth. And then the animals were created, but the animals did not speak and could not worship. So the deities decided to create human beings from mud. But these first humans had no souls and were not good keepers of the days. They destroyed them in a great flood. The deities tried a second time and created humans from wood. But the wooden people could not worship either, so they were destroyed. Those that survived are said to have become the monkeys in the trees. The sky and earth now existed, but there was no sun and no moon. A vain bird called Seven Macaw claimed to be the sun and the moon. But this was not true. 2 amazing twins, Unakpu and Xbalanque, defeated Seven Macaw by shooting him with darts. The hero twins were conceived when their mother, Ichkik, spoke to the decapitated head of their father, Unakpu, who spit on her hand from a cacao tree. Unakpu had been killed by the Death Lords of Xibalba, the underworld. The hero twins became great ball players, and to bring their father back to life, they challenged the Death Lords of the underworld to a game in Xibalba. The twins were permitted to play the ball game only after they had survived the dangerous trials set for them in the underworld. Using great skill and cunning, the twins won the ball game, and this allowed their slain father to come back to life as the maize god. The hero twins left Xibalba and climbed back to the surface of the earth. They continued up into the sky, becoming the sun and the moon. Now that the sun and the moon were in the sky and illuminated the earth, the deities created the third and final form of human beings using white and yellow corn. Corn is a precious substance that ultimately succeeds in producing true and enduring humans.
Stay within the metaphors of the Mayas. Don't, they didn't use the word creation, so you shouldn't bring in this word creation. And this is a big deal when you talk in Mesoamerican studies and translation of Popol Vuh. This is very, very delicate material. And on one side, yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you do want to maintain the metaphors of the indigenous people. But on the other hand, that what they're talking about is creation. They're talking about the creation of the earth coming out of the water and climbing up into the sky. They're talking about the creation of the corn people from, Ishmukane, grinding the corn and forming the first 4 men that come into existence. So it is creation, and not to use the word creation, it is a shame. You really feel castrated by academia, because you can't use certain words.
I mean, like you said, it's important, of course, to stay to the metaphors, but they are metaphors, right? Like, so they are, of course, not rigid, like, because the Maya, for example, the concept of dawn, right, of Sak, the whiteness, the dawn is the image they use for creation, which is also very akin to giving birth. Like in Spanish, we also say dar a luz when we talk about giving birth, to give light, to shine, so flowers dawn when they flower, so there is this universal aspect, which is, then I think what we're all as students of myth, I mean, we're of course, I think can agree with what the indigenous people also say, that their wisdom is not just for them, right? It's not like the wisdom of the peoples is not just relevant to the Quiche Maya, but it's a wisdom for potentially, for humankind, profoundly species kind of, and this is what we would call the archetypal, right? This sort of foundation of humanity, which, relates to truth, though, and history, as the Popol Vuh says, this is an instrument of vision, is the way it describes itself. So it's not an ideology, it's not a belief system, right? And
Right.
it's an instrument of vision. It's a way to see what? The dawn of life, the dawn of history. So in a way to take us back to those archetypal origins, you know, in that, you know, move that, of course, you know, Eliade talks about the illo tempore, that return to the origin, to the beginning.
Yeah, that you would have a play, that is really the Popol Vuh is to be acted out. It's a long performance that is created to form and shape a people. It's very straightforward in that sense, is that we have the word, and the word is the ancient word, it's the ancestral story, and this is to form and shape the people. We once upon a time we had the image, we had the map, we had this great pictorial history, but we no longer have that. Yet we still have the word, and our ancient word is the story that we use to form and shape the youth that is coming up. So, you know, this Popol Vuh it's a book of counsel, in the word counsel as in a group of people, but it's also a book of counsel to give advice and to create. It's a real manual of initiation of the young men and perhaps young women. They always talk about the boys going on this pilgrimage to Tulan Suiwa, like Dana was talking about. If you're going on a pilgrimage to this place where you're going to meet the great the great Oz, I was going to say, you're gonna meet the great Quetzalcoatl, the Lord Quetzalcoatl there, and you're gonna meet them. You're gonna do your dances. You're gonna sing your songs, and you're going to show the people in Tulan Suiwa, in the magical sacred city, that you are deserving to be initiated into this realm of the noble lords. So the Popol Vuh is it's this story that's there to form and create human beings. So that, because that's what Popol Vuh is all about. We're going to make human beings, and we really want them to be perfect. And so we're going to make them, first we make them out of animals, then we make them out of clay, then we make them out of wood, and we make them out of reeds, and then finally we make them out of corn. And sure enough, they're so good, they're so perfect that we have to, you know, blow smoke in their eyes. We have to you know, kind of throw the mist across their eyes and take away their vision, because they see too much.
Right.
So
there's that theme of divine jealousy that we find, that Promethean theme. But the process of creation, I think, is really remarkable in the Popol Vuh, because it also is, again, that the reeling against logocentrism. You know, well, the Popol Vuh is profoundly logocentric, you know, like it's the root ancient word, or the root ancient truth, which is another variation of tzich, you know, as meaning, of course, the what we would think of in terms of Heraclitus' concept of the logos, right? This creative, this primordial concept of the logos, which is not something opposed to mythos, you know, it's just, again, like this binary way of thinking, just as I was saying that the Popol Vuh begins to defy our definition of myth by insisting on its historical content, on its historicity. And so this is why in the field of Maya scholarship, you know, we use this concept of mytho-history to talk about. And that is a concept that was actually, you can derive it all the way back to Vico, you know, John Battista Vico, and his New Science, where he defined myth as vera narratio, true story. Because the problem with this concept of myth that is divorced from history is that it's also divorced from truth. It doesn't want to hear about truth. It wants to hear about just playing infinite possibilities, right? But the thing about truth is that it is also a profoundly archetypal reality. You know, it's not an ideology, you know, and again, this is why part of the work we have to do on ourselves, a little bit of brainwashing of ourselves, to unwash our brains, as it were, you know, like it's revisiting these fundamental, this binary oppositions, which we're so comfortable. The thing about these binary oppositions, they don't take any real intellectual power, like it's easy to divide the world in opposites in this way. But the way the Maya look at opposites, or the way you find opposites relating in myth, in true myth, is in a thoroughly dialectical way, where the mythic and the historic are completely intertwined. And this is what makes, like the Popol Vuh a true story. Not because, obviously things are literal, but in its mythological form is talking about the historical evolution of the human race. And in fact, another thing I love about the Popol Vuh is this challenging the idea that, again, the binary, the natives all think in cyclical time. We are the linear guys. But the Popol Vuh is also a linear process of creation. They actually have a goal, very goal-oriented, which is not just to create, to people the earth. Because interesting, beautiful passages. I mean, and this is here, this painting that I did is of the twins, this solar and lunar twins, which I actually, defying academic rigor, I have taken up to be a male and female. Because like you're saying, and all of the translation is the boys, but luckily I had a dissertation supervisor who wrote her thesis on the feminine figure of the Popol Vuh. And she kind of convinced me, I mean, and it's also more, again, a recasting, and the way my work with it as an artist, of course, is very much intertwined with my scholarship. As I always took my lead from what Nietzsche said about looking at scholarship, he says, from the point of view of art. Like that is the task of today, he says, like what it was then, it is now, which is to look at scholarship from the view of art, and then art from the view of life, from the vantage of life. And this is what allowed Nietzsche, to start writing also in a different way. The Birth of Tragedy from the Spirit of Music was not like an academic book. It didn't read, like at all, and this is sort of my work, and my dissertation was very much inspired in that direction to try to, and of course, this is contentious because I had conversations with Robert Siegel, the great eminent scholar of myth, about this. And he was like very unwilling to say that just everything you can do can still be part of the academic. Like there is, like, what is the limitation of the academic? You want to be experimental, you want to do this or that, there is room for that.
That type of limiting can be personified and can be turned into an attitude, and can be turned into an energy, and can be turned into a mode. And it is like how we used to think of the old academic, limiting, paternal thing. And some think that the academy is dead and it's a sad thing. But I like that particular part of it wants to fizzle away and wants to be struggling. And
I have to add there, the idea of the so in the Maya religion of day keeping, where you're keeping the sacred count of the day. Today is Hu Nakbal. It's the beginning of a Trisena, a group of 13 days. And yesterday was a big day. It was 13 win. Today's, goes back to 1. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, back to 1. In all this counting of the sacred days and keeping the order of the universe, keeping the order of the cosmos, the day keepers are always called Chuch Kahao, and that means mother, father, non tat, katit kamam, the mother, father, always a female first. It's always going to be Ishmukane Shpiakok, the mother Ishmukane, the father, the pillar Shpiakok. Ishmukane, she's the active agent. If you really study the Popol Vuh, you're going to find it's the matriarch of this horticultural world that's really behind everything. She doesn't have a lot of lines, but she's always there. And when she has a line, it's a big line, right? She's really gonna get everybody in order. And in fact, it's the heroes,
right? You gotta mention Ishkik, who's the daughter, right?
Yeah, and then Ishkik,
who's the one who really advances because she's the
Yeah, Ishkik is
progressive.
going to come in. She's from the underworld. She comes in
Yeah.
from the underworld. She rises up from the underworld.
Well, she fooled
in
the
her
underworld.
womb
I
is-
mean, she's one of the
I
heroines.
gotta ask you guys,
of Popol
you
Vuh.
guys gotta, can you give like our audience a little bit of a short version of the Popol Vuh?
I could do that. Yeah,
that'd be
Yeah.
amazing.
I would love to
Okay.
do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so short version of the Popol Vuh. The Popol Vuh starts out with an incantation. Let's see if I can do this. It's an incantation, and it says, this is the beginning of the ancient world. This is the rooting of the ancient world. This is the actual planting of the ancient word here in the place known as Quiche by the Quiche people. And then it says, we're going to tell you of the sowing and the dawning, Aweshibal Isakribal, of the creators. And then it's going to go through this listing, which is Sakol Bitol Alom Kahalom, Huna Puvuch, Huna Puutel, Sakinim Ak, Sakinim Sis, Tepeo Kukumat, Ukush Cho, Ukush Palo, Ah Rashalak, Ah Rashatzel, Chu Chashik, Rich Bishik, Rich Shik, Ri'iyom, Rimamom, Piyakop, Ishmukane, Matzanel, Chukanel, Kamul Iyom, Kamul Mamom, Chu Chashik Pachetzich. So they do this incantation. They do the naming of the names of the ancestral deities. And this is exactly the thing. This is the actual act that the human beings are going to have to do. They're going to have to name the names of the creator deities. Sakol Bitol Alom Kahalom Hunapubuchun Puter. This whole listing of these ancestral names. And then it talks about, well, now we're going to tell it in the time of the Chabal Dios and the time of the word of God. And this is what it is. We live in this darkness now. They're going to say that we're going to tell you of the times when we lived in darkness. In other words, they're kind of giving away, say, we're noble lords, we're noble scribes, but we're going to tell our story of when we lived in darkness, because now we live, under the powers of, Santiago and the saints and all these beings, because these people who are writing this, evidently they're writing it for the Dominicans, so the Dominicans can better convert the Mayas. So the Popol Vuh starts, and it talks about the creation of the world, the sky, earth, Kach Ulev. So there's the water, there's the flat water, there's a flat ocean, and there's the sky on top of it, and the heart of the sky is in the sky, and the heart of the water is in the water. Ukush Kach, part of the sky. Ukush Cho Palo, part of the water, heart of the sea, heart of the lake, and that's Hun Rakan Kakulha, which is Tezcatlipoca, and then it's
the heart of
Umat in the
sky.
water, which is heart of the sky and heart of the water. They come together and they say Uleu. They say this is the earth, and then the earth appears. And then once the earth appears, it rises up, and everything in the Popol Vuh will be this rising up. The corn will rise up, the hero twin, the boys will rise up. This will be the principal metaphor of things rising up out of the earth. Ishkik, she will rise up out of the underworld. The sun will rise up in the horizon. The Quiche Maya will rise up against their aggressive neighbors. It's this idea of rising up.
But also, here, let me interject on this concept of the word, though, because it's through the word that creation happens. So the Popol Vuh says, when the gods spoke, they created, and they also had to come together. Like, this is why this idea of multiple heads, they have to go into agreement, into council, in order for creation to happen, because the story is a story of creation. And
right.
and it's normally understood as the four creations of the world, the four dawns of creation, and the fourth creation, of course, being the one where the people of the corn rise. But the first three are a kind of prehistory, a kind of mythic prehistory of the world, before humanity arose. And it's something that in its metaphoric language, can really peer into the evolutionary history of humankind is one of the, but it goes through this evolutionary sequence, right? Like you're saying,
right.
And from, like the earth being in the first creation, and then the people of mud, who are people of earth. and they were
Yeah.
a failure, right? Because they were also, but we should pause also on the animals, because when they populated the animals, you would figure, that the earth was done, like that, why, push further, but the gods tested the animals. And it shows what the priority that the gods had, right, in the test they had for the animals, because it was a test of speech, of language. So this is one of the things that we've talked about, how at the very heart of the narrative is the birth of human language, which is what makes everything possible, like religion, rights, storytelling. And it's been, of course, like the chief characteristic that sets human beings apart, from.
Can we kind of chime in and maybe with questions or observations?
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with what both of you are saying, and I'm wondering, in this speaking the world into existence, is this also a moment in which the Mayan people are speaking their own identity into existence? In other words, are they creating themselves with a particular identity, even as they're creating the world through the word?
Absolutely. This is the idea that this is our language. This is the Maya Quiche language, the Maya Cachiquel language, the Maya Sutujil language, the Maya Mom language, all these different Maya languages. But this is our language. We are Quiche speakers, and they make a big deal out of it. This is our language. It's and by the way, this is not a small thing. This is why the Popol Vuh is not seen universally as something of all Mayan people. It's never been able. It's supposed to be the national book of Guatemala, but other Mayan people said that's not ours. That's not our language. We're not going to get behind that in a universal way. And that's that elemental identity. This is the Quiche Maya language. This is our story. This is our word. This is our ancestral word. So yes, very much so. It's this language and identity.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, identity, I think is itself it's a problematic issue, because especially as you read the Popol Vuh, because obviously, Vincent, also we have certain slightly different interpretations here, because part of the key passages I focus on is precisely the self-awareness of the Popol Vuh, like you mentioned at the beginning, that the fact that it's being written, not that like it was a time of darkness, it was that now these shadows, the surround the Popol Vuh, right? This sort of mystery, and it's as a kind of mystery that infuses both the book and its reader. Since one of these elementary things that we should remember is that when we study, let's say, the mysteries of the Maya, right? Like, or just like as we may study, we have to remember that these were also mysteries to the Maya. Like the mysteries of the Maya were also mysteries to the Maya. And so, like, the question of identity, I mean, I would push back on I understand that Quiche language is not universally spoken, but everything anthropology too has shown, like in the studies, even across Aztec culture and the Olmec, has shown that the Popol Vuh, again, like in that move, for example, Vincent, like we're already reducing the Popol Vuh to this alphabetic kind of conception of the book. And one of the things that, and so like we're already kind of introducing this hypothesis about what a book is and what an identity is, but, when you look at the Popol Vuh as a living book, at the fact that it's also inscribed into the rituals across, the languages, the literally, of course, all the family of languages still belong to the family of Maya. But I have also heard very much Cachiquel, who were their rivals, talk about how the Popol Vuh, once it's translated to Cachiquel, really contains the same, because I think the issue is more with the particular Quiche language. But I would, still get behind the universality, because once again, this is the other aspect that sometimes this academic decolonizing gesture tends to erase. And I think in this respect, I can understand why Campbell would bristle at this notion that, you know, that the Quiche book is only relevant to the Quiche, and it only has lessons about the Quiche and their way of life and identity. So to me, that's why the concept of identity is a little bit more problematic.
Well, yeah. Time out though. I mean, I'm not saying that, because I know the universality of the Popol Vuh. We see this in, 250 BC images in Itzapa, and we see these images of the hero twins way back in the pre-classic period. So it's obviously a universal, but it's just the way people take it today. And the Caxquelis, of course, are an offshoot of the Quiche people. So yeah, I get that too. But nevertheless, because I work with it in the Sutujil speaking area, and I've had a lot of pushback on saying, that's not ours, because we're Sutujil speakers and we're only named in this, and this is not ours. But then again, there's the people, just like you say, once you translate it, everybody sees it as theirs. But we have to move this forward, Norland, so people understand what this myth is about. It goes through these. It goes from the creation of the earth, and then the pine groves and the cypress groves are created on the mountainside. Then the water begins to flow. The rivers are made. The water is separated from the earth. Then you see the sky, and then you see the earth, and there's these horizons, and they make a big deal out of the idea that there's a horizon out there where the sun can come up. The sun's not come up yet, but it can come up out of this horizon. And then they talk about, like you say, the first creation is the creation of these. Actually, the first creation is the creation of the trees, which are the men, and then the women are the vines. So it's very subtle creation of the trees and the vines, and the trees men, the vines women. And then they go into this next creation of the animals, which are the deer and the rabbits. Kirch, Tsikin, Kuch, Balam, Kumatz, Sochoch, Kanti, Chachil, Kam. These are the deer, the birds, the cougar, the jaguar, and all the different kinds of snakes.
Todo estaba en suspenso, en silencio, todo inmóvil, callado. Los dioses Gucumatz y Huracán se juntaron a crear el mundo. Que el agua se retire y que surja la tierra, dijeron. Luego hicieron a los animales grandes y pequeños. Tú, venado, dormirás a la orilla de los ríos, en los barrancos y en el bosque. Andarás en 4 patas. Ustedes, pájaros, hagan sus nidos en los árboles y multiplíquense. Animales y pájaros, griten y hablen cada uno según su especie.
And these are guardians of the forest. These are the Quiche people. Quiche people means the many trees. This is the forest people. Guatemala comes from the word, Nahuatl word, Guatemalang, place of the many trees. Quiche, many trees. These are forest people. That's why I thought I'm going to go live and be a forest dweller amongst the Quiches. Live in that metaphor. And so anyway, they test the animals, the creators, the heart of the sky, heart of the earth, and they say, go ahead, name our names. And the animals, they can't do it. The birds can sing the bird songs, the cougars and the jaguars, they can growl, and the other animals can make their animal sounds, each according to their group, but they can't say their names. Therefore, their flesh will be the flesh of the obsidian blade. Their flesh will be the food and the sustenance of all others. So then they move on and they say, let's create people out of mud. And so they create the mud people, but the mud people they just fall apart in the rain. They fall apart in the water. They're not strong. If you're a proper Mayan person, you're hard. You're kof Allah, kof cha. This is this idea: be a hard guy, be a hard woman, be tough, be strong. Don't be weak. Don't aguantar. They have this word in Espanol. Hay que aguantar. I could tough it out basically. And so the mud people don't work out, so they get rid of the mud people, and they say let's make a divination. So they make a divination with Shpiakok, the mother goddess, the first mother, Ishpiakok, and Ishmukane, or Shpiakok, the first father, and Ishmukane, the first mother. They come together. These are the ancestral couples that we see all through Mesoamerica. And they make a divination. They say, our divination says we have to make the men out of site, the special kind of wood, site, which is the divining bean. It's the tree that will be the tree from which it's a legume. It's Erythrina corellodendron, and the Erythrina corellodendron gives this beautiful little red seed. It's a legume. And these seeds will be used for divining. They're poisonous to eat, but they're wonderful for divining. They're beautiful little coral-looking red seeds. And they take those seeds, and they take the yellow corn, and they take the red seeds, and they make a divination. They say men should be made out of the site tree, women should be made out of reeds. And so they make them, but these they don't turn out well either. They have no heart, they have no soul, they don't care for anybody, there's no concern for anybody, they're just thinking about themselves. This is no way to live. These are not good communal people. They don't care about one another. Let's destroy those. And in that section, they really get into this very kind of horrific destruction of these wooden people. They really let them have it. Their pots and pans rise up against them. Their grinding stone comes up and hits them in the head. The stones that are in the fire that hold the pots, the 3 hearth stones, fly out of the fire and hit them in the head. They try to jump into they try to save themselves by jumping into the caves, but the caves shut the doors in front of them. The trees hit them in the head. It's just this amazing scene of destruction. So, in the Popol Vuh, we say, oh, it's a creation story. Yeah, okay, it's a creation story, but it's also a creation. It's also a destruction story. It tells about this destruction. What's really interesting about this scene of the destruction of the wooden people is that later on, at the very end of the Popol Vuh, the lords of the Quiche lords, who are warlords, they're going to destroy people as if they were destroying wooden people. And these kind of amazing scenes of warlords and their destruction of people who do not want to plant corn and become corn people. So we get to the end of the creation of the wooden people and the destruction of the wooden people, and then it says, oh, now it's time to tell you about the first fathers, Hun Hunappu and Bukub Hunappu, 1 and 7 Hunappu. The name Hunappu is like first ancestor, those who come from the place of Pu. Pu is the place known as Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan was the first Tolan. Tolan is the sacred city, the divine city. And this ancestral man is a twin. He's got the Hun Hunappu and Bukub Hunappu. Those numbers 1 and 7 are basically talking about the sacred calendar, and those are sacred calendar names. There's a beautiful esoteric story of the Popol Vuh. This story is very intricate, and the naming of all the beings in it have to do with the calendar. And every single day of the 260-day divine calendar are going to talk about something. So today is the day of one dawning. When I saw that, I said, oh, that's very auspicious. It's a day of one dawn, Hunakbal. That's a good day. I talked to my diviner guide that we're going on a walk this weekend, and he said, oh, that's great. It's a great day. You guys will have a good time. So anyway, they go into the story of the fathers of the hero twins. And the fathers of the hero twins are very naive. They're not sharp. They're not yet corn people. These two folks, they have a wonderful father, Shpiakok. They have a wonderful Shpiakok means he that comes from the tortoise shell earth. He that comes from the tortoise shell carapace earth. He'll be coming out of the tortoise shell earth, and he'll be being pulled up by his sons Hunapu and Ishbalamke. Hunapu is one hunter, and his brother is his twin brother, and his name is Ishbalamke. And now many people have said, okay, so Hunapu is the boy and Ishbalamke is the girl, or Hunapu is the male and Ishbalamke is the feminine. And I'm totally behind that. The name Ish is a prefix. It always says this person who comes from this, so Ish Biakok, he that comes from the tortoiseshell earth. Ish Balamke, he of the jaguar deer. In other words, he that comes from the forest. He's the one that comes. He's the lord of the forest. He's the lord of the wild. And Hunapu is the one hunter. So those two. And I wrote this. I think it's a great article in this book on twinship. It's called Gemini and the Sacred. Gemini and the Sacred, twins and twinship in mythology and religion. And it's all about twins all around the world. Very interesting study that we all got into with Kimberly, Professor Kimberly Christine Payton from Harvard Divinity School. And we did this study of twinship. And the hero twins, what are so beautiful about the hero twins of the Popol Vuh is they're so collaborative and they're so complementary. And that's that male-female. This is this beautiful anima structure that we talk about so much in Jungian psychology. These two guys, these two girls, they really bring it together in this idea of this complementary, not opposition, but just complementarity. I believe that it's not I don't like to use the word duality anymore because I think that's not duality. It's this idea of twins and twinship. It's not a big difference, but it is a difference. So anyway, they tell the story of Hunapu and Hun Hunapu and Bukub Hunapu. They go into the underworld real quickly. They get their heads cut off right away. They have no idea how to deal with the lords of death. They cannot face the lords of death, and they have no idea how to deal with these guys. And the lords of death are real tricksters. They love to make fun of you. They love to trick you. And what they really want to do is cut your head off and then place your head on this tree. They cut his head off and they place it in the fork of the tree. And when they place his head in the fork of the tree, instantaneously the tree is covered with these gourds. So if you live in Central America, or you live in Africa, this is the calabash tree. Calabash is a perfectly round gourd. It's a beautiful tree. These gourds just come flying right out of the branches of the tree. So they just have this incredibly different kind of look. The tree in itself is numinous. It's I think what would Eliade would call it a hierophany, where the divine is actually in nature. And so you see this divine gourd head tree, and there is Hunapu's head in the tree. The lords of the underworld said, absolutely nobody goes near this tree. It's forbidden. Don't go near the tree. The fruit is forbidden. Don't cut that fruit. Don't taste that fruit. Don't eat that fruit. Don't do it. And of course, you have the curious young maiden, Ishkik. She, the blood maiden, the moon maiden, she can't help herself. She says, can that be? Can that be? Is this fruit not sweet? Can it be that I cannot taste this fruit? I really want this fruit. I really want to taste this fruit. So she goes underneath the tree, and the tree begins to talk to her. It says, no, you don't want this. Absolutely, you don't want to have anything to do with me. And she says, but I do. I've heard that this fruit is so sweet. Of course, this is a little play on the idea of female adolescence and this desire, the hormones, the hormones driving the poor young maiden towards the desire in the paradisical garden, so to speak, of the underworld. Of course, she says, no, I do want it. And so he says, the old man in the tree, his skull head, the ancestor says, okay, stick your hand out, place your hand out, open your palm, your right palm, and place it before me. And so she does, and he spits into her palm. She closes her hand and she opens it back up, and there's nothing. There's nothing left of the essence of the spittle, and then you have the creation of the hero twins. So now we've got to the hero twins, and Huno and Ishkik. She does this marvelous transformation. They want to cut her heart out because they want to cut her heart out. They want to sacrifice her because she has gone against the desires of the lords of the underworld. But she tricks everybody. She transforms as sap. Ishkik is like she's the daughter of blood gatherer. So she's a sap gatherer. She gathers the sap. She transforms it into this incense, and then the incense blinds the lords of the underworld. She escapes from the underworld. She climbs up onto the face of the earth, and then she enters into the house of Ishmukane, the mother goddess of the corn people, and then begins the story of the hero twins, Hunapu and Ishbalanque. So Hunapu and Ishbalanque, the hero twins, are in the womb of their mother, Ishkik, the blood maiden, the moon maiden, and as she comes to gestation with her boys in her womb, like the moon, she grows. The story of a woman's life is played out every month, from conception of the child, the little eyelash of the baby girl, of the rising moon and the new moon. This is the story of the moon. Every month, a woman's life is told through the transformation of the moon as it rises in the west as a little eyelash of a baby girl infant, and then the moon grows into a young girl, and then it transforms into a maiden, and then becomes a mature woman and a full moon, and then she has her children, and then she begins to grow older and older until she disappears in the east where the sun rises. So the moon moves from west to east, and the sun moves from east to west. So sun's moving east-west, moon is moving west to east, and these are the different stories of men and women. So Ishkik, she comes up from the underworld with her boys in her womb, and right away, of course, she's just escaped the underworld and these tyrannical patriarchs, and now she's in the house of this great matriarch. And the matriarch, Ishmukane, she of the buried corn, she's not going to have it. She says, no way, my sons are dead in the underworld. There's no way that you can have, because Ishkik, the blood maiden, blood woman, Ishkik, she says, I have your sons, grandsons in my womb, and the first mother, the mother of Hunhunapun Vukupunapu, says that cannot be. My boys died in the underworld, decapitated by the lords of the underworld, Hun Kame and Bukub Kame, or one death and seven deaths. So the boys Hunapu and Shbalanker, they're born on the mountainside as if they were corn. And then the metaphor begins where they talk about Hunapu and Ishbalamke, one hunter and she of the jaguar deer. They're spoken about as if they were corn. They're born standing up straight on the mountainside, just like many hero twins. They're born into the world ready to go.
Before we jump off of corn, since we came back to corn a second time, I just want to mention that, of course, Osiris is also the grain, right? He is the corn. So it's, this idea that these people are made from corn. What happens with the Death Tarot card, right? The Death Tarot card is the reaper cutting down the grain, but the heads of the grain are us, right? So this idea of humans as corn is not just a maize thing. It's a grain thing. It's a grain thing all over the world, the association of us with corn. So anyway, I've been wanting to jump in and say that, and we had a transition point, so I thought I'd bring it in.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. I wish we could do more of that. This idea that, this is an horticultural story, and this idea that you're going to cut the heads of corn off when you reap them. This is and that's exactly what Mayas do when they go out there and they take the two heads off of each of the canes of corn, because of the wild corn that we have here. It's not a DeKalb corn. It's not a one of these other kinds of corns. This is a corn that has two heads. Monsanto came down here and they were just like wanted to get rid of Mayan corn. Unbelievable. The Mayas were like, are you kidding us? We've had this seed forever. And it got bad. I mean, there was burning of things and burning of buildings because of this. And this is very serious with the Mayas. You are not taking our corn seed away. There was called La Ley de Monsanto, the law of Monsanto.
You're living it and seeing it, and it's really wonderful to hear, the story. I mean, the story is quite an epic one, and especially in the way, because even so far we haven't really narrated the entire book, because the story, after the creation of the corn people, the text becomes more historical. It starts to read more like a series of lineages, but actually not after or not before. There is this era in which the corn people themselves are now born, and the tribes, and then the whole kind of initiation of Maya history proper begins. But then it continues, in the fire and the quest for fire, like the importance of having control over fire, and then all the way down to like the time the Spanish arrived. I mean, it's like, but in a much more kind of chronicle type of way. So one of the things to highlight about the Popol Vuh is this temporal expanse, from the very dawn of creation, like all the way through the creation of the world and the prehistory of humanity, even the evolutionary history of humanity, because one of the things I love about the way the gods create humanity, it is through this evolutionary process. So again, it's not just true that it's just these kind of endless cycles that repeat. There is progress, because the gods are very clear that they were not happy with the animals because they failed the test of human speech, which is this world disclosive ability of human speech. I mean, some linguists think of language as having two primary functions. One is the problem-solving use of language, when we apply language to, actual empirical problems. But there's also the poetic use, obviously, which is a world disclosive function of language. And this is the way in which mythology, and poetry creates, as it were, like a world, a world of imagination, a world of consciousness. And the gods are very explicit about this. They want human, specifically human consciousness. And of course, the logos, which is language, is an essential feature of humanity. And this is why, it's just so beautiful in the way, the Popol Vuh pretty much hones in, and all the creation mythologies, of course, like you'll realize this birth of the word, this creative power of the word, which stands at the very creation of our species. This ability for symbolic thinking and expression and art. And now if you're a follower of paleoanthropology, for example, like we have unearthed, like all these fossils of all these forms of humanity who had some sort of form of symbolic expression. And even storytelling, even the Neanderthals, we used to think of them as being brutes and so on, but there's already a lot of examples of culture. But everything is linked to this feature, which, Noam Chomsky, calls the sort of the basic property of language, something which is this syntactical kind of property. And in many ways, the Popol Vuh, I like to say, agrees with Chomsky's idea about language of not being just for communication, right? Because the gods, were pretty satisfied with the way, I mean, in terms of communication, all the animals could do it, right? Everybody can communicate within their own clan and even across species. But the feature of human language had to do with this horizon of universality, the horizon of universality, which is disclosed by the creator and destroyer gods.
Sorry, I just wanted to say off of that point, I think it's interesting this the idea that you were saying that the gods wanted to hear their creation speak their names. And so the idea that what constitutes this gift that they're trying to give, this gift of consciousness, is to be able to speak the name of God. And you go down that line. So they're speaking this, the Popol Vuh is speaking to existence their own story, and like at the very origin of that is speaking God, which goes back to speaking to the self. I think that's really interesting.
That's so wonderful. That you hit it. This idea that the language is to show adornment, to adore the gods, to be able to pray to the deity. Yeah. This idea that language is to pray. Language is used to pray to the deities and to give them thanks. This idea of gratitude. Thank you for our lives. Maltios chawa, Maltios chawe. Thank you for our lives. Thank you for all these things. And this is what Maya day keepers and Maya prayer makers do. They have this really amazing capacity to speak out loud. They're always praying out loud. They don't pray in silence, praying out loud so that the deities can hear them. And the heart of the sky and the heart of the earth and all the other deities listen to me as I speak your language. And it's like the person, the day keeper, becomes the divinities themselves and speaks to themselves through the human being. In other words, the human being who's the prayer maker becomes the divine ancestor and speaks to the divine ancestors in the divine ancestors' adoration. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. In more occult terms as well, actually. I mean, from alchemy, I guess the creation story, going back through the ancient Egyptian lineages, like Nun was the waters of creation, so the abyss of unlimited potential. And out of that, Ra, which was consciousness, which was the self-created one, Ra spoke, and as Ra spoke, like when Ra spoke, it created air and moisture, which was Shu and Tefnut. And so that's like, I guess it's like the duality aspect from the all splitting into consciousness and then the energy of things. But then air and moisture, and then from that it was like the birth of the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And what happened was there was a bit of a story about how Shu created space between heaven and earth. And I think it's that in that separation, there's a lot of talk earlier about the separation of things. And I think that's interesting when we think about it in like a different lineage of this same sort of like creation story, but then how the word is that divine power of creation. Right. And how like I think in the separation of things in magical practices, if you think of the external world as your unconscious being reflected back to you through I guess meaning making, like it's through becoming conscious of your unconscious through your inner world being reflected, the outer world being reflected through your inner world, and that relationship. But the word, like a lot of practices in magical practices, it's about holding silence and only like being really careful with the word, because that's where the power is of creation. So if once you can put a word out there, that interacts, it joins the inner world and the outer world together, and you're engaging with the process of what you're experiencing. And I think this is like, with these stories, with the mythologies, with these ancient stories that hold so much more of the metaphysical aspects of life. They're interpretive. They're things that we can relate to in so many different ways. It's not about, which is what I think in the Western world now, is all the importance has become on the actual word, the official word, And I think maybe, Will, what you were saying earlier about in academics as well, I think sometimes it's more about what is the official word, and like, you know, what are we allowed to say? What is the agreed meaning making behind words sometimes that separates the experience of the essence behind those things. So I think like it's interesting listening to all this and looking at different frameworks of creation stories and things, where it feels like it's in the separation that there is the ability to create something like new and through experience and engagement with it. And it's the power of the word is very interesting. And it is from God, but also I think that's where as humans we can become as God in that process.
I think I've wanted to mention this like the whole time we've been talking. I have a lot of things I could say, but I'll try and keep it compact. But the idea of the separation and this duality, you know, you both have talked about, you know, whether that duality is clearly identified in Mesoamerican myth and culture, and you've both kind of brought up different opinions around that. But that duality is exactly that separation. There's a wonderful philosopher, James Matthey, who wrote a book, Aztec Philosophy, I think it's called, where he writes about the concept that it's exactly what Don's talking about. Actually, I think he calls it the terms, I think it's anemic tension or something, but it's about the two components. And the whole idea is that the cosmos is evolving and continuing because there's a tension that is actually creating an energy. I think it's called Linn, right? So that energy is what perpetuates the entire cosmos. So one of the reasons that corn is so important is it holds the tension in itself. Corn is both masculine and feminine, for instance, and it's above ground and below ground. It's kind of a Mesoamerican axis mundi. It has these dualities, these tensions, and it's always cycling through them. They are always in motion. That's the really critical thing. So if the motion ever stops, and the motion will stop if there's not a tension. So that duality, this is the way I understand it all, that duality has to have some tension. So when we talk about the masculine and the feminine, are they totally complementary? Are they competing in some way? Well, the way I read the myths, and I work kind of more broadly across Mesoamerica, so probably even more so grounded in Aztec and other traditions, but Maya as well, that tension between whether we're taking the hero twins or other sets of masculine and feminine, that is the exact thing that is perpetuating the existence of the cosmos. So when we talk about, like in the Popol Vuh, we are created as corn. A part of what that means is that we have the embedded, the innate ability to also hold those tensions, the dark and the light. It gets very Jungian here, the feminine and the masculine. And it is that duality that's constantly cycling, but yes, not in the exact same way. It's reorganizing, which is exactly where I went at the beginning of all this when Dana read the poem about the center, because that's the function of the center. The center is almost like a mandala. That's how I always think of it, right? It's always coming back together in a perfect design, but never lasting. So the center is constant, but changing. And it's the tension between the two pieces. And this is why corn is the ideal human, and a human is to be corn, because corn is the expression of the perfect balance and continual energy, Linn, of you name it, any duality you want to work with, feminine, masculine, dark, light, underground, above ground. And so, you know, and I think so there's so much, I think that's such a key to how this all holds together. One other thing I did feel like I needed to say, because this is about decolonizing, and that's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I sat with a lot of these concepts, and I lived in Guatemala among the Quiche Maya in Chela. It's been a long time there, and then in studies, really trying to get out of like the colonialist mindset. Obviously, that's impossible to do completely, but it's a very worthy. I just decided if this is going to be, I'm going to study a culture that's not at all mine. I'm going to do my best to get into it. And actually, I used artists so that the Nietzsche approach, I actually used artists, and I used Octavio Paz, and I used Frida Kahlo, and I used others to try and that I felt like used concepts consciously or not that dealt with the same dualities. But one thing that I think is so important is checking some of the things that we say. And a few things I've heard come up are things that I feel like are kind of our colonialist projections. So when we talk about things being necessarily goal-oriented, to me, that's a big, I have to pump the brakes on that and say, that's such a colonialist tendency that I don't believe that goal orientation for the way we understand it exists at all in the indigenous Mesoamerican mindset. I do not think, I think they truly live in a everything is a cycle. So in the same way, not to like push back too much, but when we say the Popol Vuh is about what's rising, I would think that a Mayan would say the Popol Vuh is about what's happening below as much as what's happening above, because so
Right.
much of the meat of the story is in Xibalba, so much the underworld, like so much of the generative, the generative quality, which is a very, it's very feminine, very fertile, very fecund. That is a part of the story. So when we look at it from a truly like, Mesoamerican indigenous mindset, we would see them as having equal weight. So, why can they go out and just like behead those corn stalks like that mercilessly? Well, they don't have the same issue with death and the end that we do, because they're not obsessing over the end, because it's not linear. And it's all okay. It's just coming back around. And that's why the corn humans are the humans that are the best. It's not because we're created in perfection, like it's because we're created with the ability to hold those dualities and keep that dynamic tension going. And so we are reflective of Linn, and we reflect the continuation of the cosmos. And so we can participate in that with with the gods. And that is how we exist. We have to be corn in that sense. We have to, when we get like, I read the Popol Vuh and many other myths as a way to track, as almost a map. We talked about that a little at the beginning, like where something to come back to when you're lost in humanity. And I think that's how, I'll just go ahead and say all this, since I'm not sure how much longer we'll go, but in terms of decolonizing, but this is these myths, and like, is it an ideology or not? Those are great questions. I think something to wrestle with, but it certainly is a way of life. And the way I study it, a social structure that's coherent and evolving. And the thing that's really happening in that social structure, because I studied corn throughout these different, up until the fall of the Aztecs, is that the social structure is adapting because of that basic principle of tension. And that's death and life, that's dark and light, that's feminine and masculine. And that to me is essentially what's happened in colonialism. So you asked the question at the beginning, Norland, about kind of how does these concepts of femininity fall into this? And I sort of, I was like, could say so much at that moment, but really, when I say it's all kind of the same thing, the stagnancy in ideology, and it is ideology. This is where the ideology really fails us. It becomes dogmatic. So that patriarchal stuckness, that's stuck in the masculine. Colonialism, it's stuck in the consumerism, the capitalism, it's stuck in the light and the obsession of life. And if it can't balance out, if we don't, that's the huge difference, just like social, like worldview speaking, is that Mesoamericans would have never tried to find the perfect structure. And that's why I think it's so important to take the emphasis off perfection and goal orientation, because that's what screwed us, for lack of better terms. Like, we have to leave that concept of perfection and goal orientation and return to somehow find it in us, be influenced by these other brilliant worldviews, to find a way to cycle back through and move and be fluid and readapt the feminine and readapt the underworld and re-emphasize the importance of what happens there and the ugly, and in academia, the things we can't see and the places we don't know we're going, and the chaos and the darkness. Like, this is literally the antidote to colonialism, this to me, and it's like embedded in these stories.
Well, I love this conversation because it's I know we left it kind of like loose, untied, and we should say something about, how do you really get over? but remember, like earlier, I also was saying that because we're dealing with the gaze, it's not about the content, like, and so the way you're criticizing like the linear aspect, well, the goal orientation is just one side of opposites, right? So like what makes, to me, like the telltale of an ideology is the splitting of opposites. And then to put one as higher and the other one, like as lower, like one is the bad guy and then this is the good guy.
Hierarchy.
That-
Hierarchy is
that-
the problem. Mhm.
Yeah, so but that's how that's how you framed it too, in terms of like bad, goal-oriented bad, like cyclical.
Oh, no, I think
good.
they all have a place. I think that goal
Yeah.
orientation, I think, the masculine, all of it has a place. The life, or
Yes.
like, it's just about the tension, the balance of them being in communication, which is the function of the center, which is why so many Mesoamerican cities are developed around a center. Like, that's where the thing. So definitely it's part of it. I didn't mean to say.
Yeah, because that's something
Yeah, I
that,
think
again,
so.
we use very easily in language, is to detach, because again, it's very easy to have like good guys versus bad guys, and that fork in the road. And there may be, I'm not also even invalidating that. It's like I used to say in our class, Pacifica classes, that the flat opposition to dualism is also dualistic. Like to say the dualism is bad is itself a dualistic.
I actually think that the way forward out of the dualistic is the triplicity of the relationship between. So moving our focus away from good, bad, masculine, feminine, like, all those things, and focusing on the relationship between all of those aspects. And like, I think it's I don't know if there's a in terms of duality and triplicity within this framework.
Well, and in the Maya, they have also five. Five is an archetype. Three is an archetype. We have a threesome. So like this multivalent kind of logic. And but I think, again, like, how do we overcome? This is also obviously very important. Has been very important to me, because again, the Popol Vuh itself tells us that the person who thinks that can read it and assess it, that to that person, and this again, like, we go through different translations, but the Popol Vuh puts into the foreground the fact that both reader and the book are enveloped in this aura of mystery, and that is the aura of non-identity. And this is the other thing we need to be put in, against this identitarian kind of ideology, which leads to identity politics, but also does not address, like, we can talk about here and like how it all belongs in a harmony, but imagine talking about the Holocaust, as part of this global harmony. If you just look at things in a certain way, then something like genocide is not so bad. It's just part of the global picture, like that. So that's not really the way to get out of the colonial mindset, because again, it's not a content. We have to address the framework, the logic of our discourse and our point of view, because we don't see our point of view. It's precisely our blind spot. And this archetypal way, sometimes we go around, it is a very colonizing gesture to think that you have these generic forms that can fit across all, like mythologies, and then you don't really have to take into account the actual historicity in which each is embedded, because we I think sometimes think of the archetypal as being really no more than a generic container. The hero is just a generic container. We can talk about it as an archetype and stuff, but we're talking about this skeleton, which is never really without its flesh, its historical flesh, So this is why, again, even thinking about the archetypal from the Maya perspective forced me to think of archetypes not as ahistoric in the way Jung would have us, but as being profoundly mytho-historic. And so that you cannot detach the generic form, which is just a generic concept. It's empty. So you're not saying really anything when you say hero, like Let's speak about specific, let's give flesh. So it can be also this narcissistic appropriation of myth, which is always to turn myth into an image of myself. Like, oh, they're just like us. Like, oh my God, like all of this, it's like, look, they're just like me, and I had this discussion in the Campbell Foundation with someone, because one of the editors, because it's like, when you have a Native American, for example, saying how he travels across the continents and he feels that it's all the same, and he goes to the Maya, he goes to the Northern, and he feels it's all the same. That it's not the same of him saying it's all the same than, white liberal driving in their SUVs, sipping their latte, like down the boulevard. I mean, so it matters who you are, right? Like, obviously, like for you to say it's all the same. But
I think that's sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I think that's such an interesting thing. I was going to sort of go back to Chief Lyons. You were talking about how he was talking that there's this universal understanding between, and you could say like cultured indigenous groups or such like that there's, even though he didn't know the language of these people, they didn't know their culture is different, that there was this universality to the mythology, to the ancestral and traditional wisdom that they were expressing. And I think that's such an interesting thing to keep in mind when we're looking at these mythologies, and because we're talking about this, and there is this otherism that is so insurmountable when we're speaking about it, because we're saying that this is their culture, this is what they're doing, and this is ours, and what we must do to fix ours is to appropriate or
right.
The answer is the pendulum swing into their direction rather than our direction. And so, but I think the idea behind that concept, or that idea, what he was saying about that universality in the myth, in the story, that once the human has breath, his breath is given to them, and from that breath they speak the word. That word is the expression of that collective consciousness that we all have. That's kind of that universal idea, right, in all of these mythologies, these stories. And so the consciousness that each person is expressing, though the word, the language is different, it is all the same, that it's that collective, that's the human gift that we're talking about. So the fact is, like, finding that connection between the stories, between the cultures, of, instead of it being how can I best understand them as they understand themselves, well, how can I best understand myself? How is what is the story that I'm hearing in this language, in this culture, how does that connect to the self that I am? And that's the through line that that we're talking about. And so I wonder, I think that's, if we're talking about decolonization, all that stuff, like approaching it from we must decolonize something and then find something else that fixes this problem, is also a very
it's part of our ideology.
dualistic.
So,
And so
let me,
I think that actually,
Don, sorry, Don. I want to hear from Sunil before we run out of time. Sunil, I'm gonna pull you in. Sunil, by the way, lives in Goa, and for those of you guys who don't know what Goa is, Goa was a formerly colonized portion of India by Portugal. And so it's kind of like if you know what Macau is in China, it's like Macau of India. So Sunil, I wonder, as you sit and listen to us talk about Native American Indians colonized, what is your reflection? Where are you right now?
Well, this is really great listening to all these stories, because last Sunday only I was discussing with Will that whenever we are studying the mythology, our main focus is always on Greek, Egyptian, Norse, but we are never being taught the Native American myths, or even for Irish myths for that purpose. So this is really interesting, listening all these stories. Let me share one small belief with you in India. So there is a community of priests, Brahmins, right? who have the right of conducting worship. And there is a small community within this entire priestly community, which is supposed to have the power of resurrecting fish. So they can eat fish, just leave the head part and tail part. Then they throw it in the ocean, use some mantras, and the fish is revived again. So there is no mystery, there is no magic. This is just because those people want to eat fish and they want to justify it. So I think, we are trying so much hard to find the meaning in stories, but maybe sometimes stories are just there for the enjoyment. Maybe understanding the meaning itself is the colonial mindset. When we think about that, right? And I mean, being part of academics and research, I enjoy this conflict of narratives because it's always like my truth against your truth. And again, the question is, does anybody knows the truth? Right. So in Vedic literature, there is a very important verse called as Nasadiya Sukta, and which it goes like, what was there before the universe? Maybe this, maybe that, maybe nothing. And finally, the verse ends like, well, nobody really knows because nobody was present there. So there are these different narratives coming in together, and sometimes there is magic, there is entertainment. Well, I particularly mentioned because being academician and researcher, I enjoy this. I enjoy the conflict. But if I was not being part of academics and research, then my truth would have been the ultimate truth. What we see, the violence happening in Middle East or even in Asia, that is because everyone is believing that their truth is the real truth. And so I want this place for worship. My God is real God. And that is creating so much of problem right now. So yeah, those were the things I wanted to share. And there is one more thing I wanted to highlight. See, colonial mindset, okay, that is part of our history. But I think each time blaming them is not the right thing. There are also other phenomena happening. Like, for example, there is a process called as acculturation, right? So you see within a country, there is a mainstream narrative and there are folk narratives. And the mainstream narrative always tries to take over the folk narratives. At the same time, folk narratives are also trying to get connected with the mainstream narrative. So these things keep on happening. What if Quiche or Popol, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, these tribes had 4 different variations of stories, right, and only one got popular? And what we're listening today is the most popular one. Right. So I think right, colonial history is part of our history, but at some point we should give them some relaxation also. This process of stories getting developed, one dominating another, this is a natural thing. This will keep on happening. So those are the things I wanted to share, William. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunil.
Thank you very much. Yes. Can I say something? I wanted to say something. I really, after working with the Popol Vuh, translating it from its origin and the Quiche 10 times from the start, I always began again. And what always has amazed me is how much I enjoy it. How enjoyable the actual work is. When you enter into the word and you let this word have this magical capacity to create image and create soul through the ancestral word. There's just nothing like it. This idea, when I was trying to understand it, and I went to Hillman online, and I went to him in, his Terry lectures, and it was all the idea that this is to be enjoyed. It's just what our friend is saying. Maybe it's not about understanding it as much as it is to enjoy it. And I think there's a lot to it. There's something else I wanted to say that Norland had said.
That's the rising up. The rising up feels like joy. So continue.
Okay. Yes. The rising up feels like joy. You're rising up.
That's the feeling function of that theme. Yeah.
Yes. And then Norland was saying that it starts in cosmogony with the creation of the earth out of the water and the sky, and it ends in the destruction of dynasty. This is a complete myth. It never stops. Even the historical part at the end, the names of the lords of the Quiche who are burned by the Spaniards, they're burned in a fire, and their names are 3 deer and 9 dogs. Well, 3 deer and 9 dog are these very, very mythological names. They go way back in time. This 9 dog, we see this in these hieroglyphic stones that are way back in the pre-classic world. And so what I wanted to say was, they're saying this is not the end. When our lords, our twins, like the hero twins, throw themselves into the fire, they're going to always come back. And it's not so bad that they were actually burned in the fire like we would think, that they're incinerated in the fire. No, this is an immolation. This is a sacrifice. And it's saying our lords will come back. And someday the Quiche will reign and lord over the world. I don't get this for myself. This was interpreted to me by a Maya daykeeper. It says, look at the end of the Popol Vuh. It says right there that our lords and we will return. We will be the lords of our land again. So, and I don't know what to say. It's an amazing.
Can I just mention one important point that I think also, I know we have only the last 5 minutes, that again, because one of the things I think we have to also bring into the equation is the fact that this so-called sociological function of myth, to create a coherent community, that's also at the core, and at that level, what really is of importance, and this is again like going back to in our evolutionary history, is how do you deal with the inherent violence that threatens within any community? So I think one of the things, again, we of course like to enjoy it as aesthetic objects, but these mythologies had real serious issue to deal with. It's just like, how do you harness the forces of violence and revenge, which threaten the social order? And this is where I do have to, I think, go to René Girard for this, to who makes a very compelling case about the link between violence and the sacred, right? And how, the problem of violence, look around us, right? It's like we human beings are a violent creature. It's just like, as nice as we may be, personally, like look at what we do as collectives, and this is why the colonial gaze is so hard to detect, because that's what we do as a collective, not as individuals, in the ways we habitually. So I spoke about the generic form of an archetype versus the mytho-historic. And I think you can, but the struggle is for universality. So to get back to Michaela, the struggle is for universality, because that's what the colonial thinks. Sometimes they fall into this historical relativism, where everything is different and nothing to do with, but then we take away the universality of their message, of their wisdom. And so I do think that, that is a fight worth fighting for.
I think that to that point, you're talking about violence, especially with the lens, we're talking about colonialism, and you were mentioning, all the horrible things that happen in the world and all of that. Like that is such, to your point, Rosalie, about the corn people being so perfect in the fact that they are able to embody these dualities and bring a wholeness to them and be in one being. And so like this idea of violence, this want to cleanse it and purify it, and that's maybe that's a Western Western ideal, but that's part of it, and it's in the Popol Vuh, it's in these these mythologies across the world, they're violent, they're dark, they have all of that in it because it's a part of what humanity is as well. And so like not shying away from that part, that it's not, oh, these things happen, it's okay. No, it is a part of our nature just as much as anything else is, and it's something we have to find acceptance and it part of what we're looking to find answers to, or identity from, or whatever. So I like that was mentioned.
I think it's interesting. I've been doing a lot looking at the like cross-referencing the duality of order and chaos in relation to individuation and community. And I think they're really important to look at in terms of order requires it needs to be fed for it to be maintained. And in the current systems, it's enforced order with a, like, anything that threatens the order is marginalized because it threatens the order to fall into chaos. But we need to accept chaos is creation. We need order to fall apart that doesn't work naturally so that we can create something new that does work, so that we can engage with it in a way that benefits. And I think that has to be looked at in terms of individuation and relationship to the collective. How does the collective hold space for the individual, and how does the individual feel held by the collective? And because it's in those ways that if the collective doesn't engage with the order, it will fall apart. And so it's like a mirror of these two, where if there's any conflict between order and chaos, that's usually because in social systems, there's conflict between individuation and the collective. So if we can, like stories and mythology, that's a way of us creating collective meaning making. So if we can hear each other's individual stories or interpretations and experiences and build that into the collective narrative, then we're creating order in relation to chaos that is adaptive and it's changed. There's room to grow. And the edge of chaos theory is showing us, instead of a materialistic world where it's all balanced on order, we're looking at more of the metaphysical aspects of order and chaos, but also with our own individuation. We're not just physical humans, we're spiritual, we're emotional, we're mental, and there's more room for that. And even in terms of like how it just all works together as a system. The story is a way of us making room for everyone in the all and building like actual order that is adaptive and like for everyone to thrive in, really.
What a beautiful concluding thought.
Wonderful.
Dawn, that was so eloquent
That
and
was
so
great.
well put.
Yeah.
I want to really thank everyone who responded to our invitation to participate as panelists. Vincent, thank you for reaching out to me those several months ago and giving me just another opportunity to connect with my good friend Norland, and I really appreciate, Dennis, I know you didn't get a whole lot of time tonight, but I feel like I'm swimming in deep waters. I'm really blessed to be surrounded by the collection of brilliant minds: Michaela, Rosalie, Sunil, Dawn. I mean, and of course Will. I mean, I'm intimidated by my colleague every time he opens his mouth. I feel brilliance. And I often wonder, are we able to see these colonizing tendencies in other cultures but not in our own? Do we see them when they're far away but not up close? So, going out with that as a thought, I'd like to do my moment of silence here, and let's go forth. It's a beautiful evening, people. And look, all over the world, I mean, you know, what a truly international myth salon we were able to have tonight. I mean, you know, we talk about it, but I mean, if we had to just look at the faces, look at what we have here. Just settle into that. This is beautiful. Thank you, people. This has been
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
very
everyone. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.